Welcome to Mindset Chatter. Today's fabulous guest, Annie Barsch, Roberts Wesleyan Women's Field Hockey Team. Yay. Hello, Annie. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I am good. As we were discussing before we hit record here, your sunny California weather appears to be slightly more sunny than mine today.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's a little cloudy. Sun's peeking through a little bit.
I will say though, it's nice to have a fellow West Coast guest on here that I don't have to play with the time zones and try to figure out what's going on.
That was like my whole recruiting process was trying to figure out time zones with coaches and then they'd forget. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm behind.
Right, and you forget, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, no worries on that today. I've got to tell you, I've been looking forward to this topic, faith over fear.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was kind of thinking of, I don't know if I thought of you first or the topic first, but pretty immediately afterwards, you two associate yourselves with each other. And I think for two reasons. One was when we think about faith. I think we immediately go to kind of a religious connotation for that word. I think it's more multifaceted than that. But with you recently becoming the field hockey's team chaplain for the upcoming season, what a perfect person.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I mean, faith is definitely like in my life been a part of that like Christian like taken on that role for sure. But like even when I was just thinking about the topic and I was like, well, faith can be related to like having faith in something and like getting your hopes up and like especially in a team setting, like faith in your ability and stuff too.
Well, I like that faith in the ability because a lot of the work I do is obviously with how we handle ourselves through performance. And
Hmm.
I think it's how do we ready ourselves to be able to deal with the different scenarios that come up. And I think that's a kind of faith in our ability to get through the adversity.
Yes. Hmm.
So let's start here. So when I was researching the topic of fear, I came across this. Apparently, it's kind of old. Hold on, when did it start? It's called the Litany Against Fear, and I think looks like maybe William Shakespeare wrote about it in Julius Caesar. But most recently, it came up in the 2021 Dune movie. And it's kind of I guess a litany is like a little saying or a poem kind of thing, right? But let's
Yeah.
start here. One thing it says, it starts off saying, I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer.
Mm.
And when you think about situations you've been in, whether it's on the field hockey pitch or whether it's in the classroom or whatever, um, what are your thoughts when you hear fear is the mind killer?
When I think about that, I think fear a lot of times, like when we're afraid of something, can prevent us from even like trying in the first place and from even going for something. So in that sense, it definitely like kills off like faith in yourself and like belief in your capability and things. And that's like it's tough.
Yeah,
But
I think that's a good point where it holds you back because I think if we look at the interplay between fear and growth, if that fear is keeping us away from the edge of our comfort zone, um, we have to push our comfort zone to grow. And if we're too afraid to poke on the edge of it, we can't grow. So I love that. Do you have, can you think of an example of, let's say, a time on the field hockey pitch where you've held back because you were afraid of some result you maybe you couldn't control or maybe, looking foolish or whatever?
yeah, I've definitely had that, I think, with like trying when it comes to trying new skills and like assessing like the like situation and like how much of a risk that would be and like letting people down if it doesn't work out or if I mess up or make a mistake. I know I've experienced that a lot, like in field hockey and just not wanting to let the people around me down by me accidentally like trying to take a risk.
So is that when you say like the not wanting to let people down? Because when I think of fear, I think of three flavors of it. We fear failure, we
Hmm.
fear success, which is kind of odd for some people to hear. But I think maybe what you're poking at a little bit is we fear judgment. So do you think like your fear of not wanting to let your teammates down, is that more from a kind of standard you hold yourself to, or is it more from the standpoint you're worried that people are going to like say things about like why'd she try that in that scenario?
Yeah, I think fear of judgment definitely gets in the way of, and I think that also plays a part in like performance pressure too. When you start playing into that, like not wanting to let the people around you down and what they're going to think and what they're going to say after the game's over. Um, and like the things you're not going to hear and you can't control that. But I think, yeah, the best thing you can do is to just give your best and your best effort.
I think it's interesting in your kind of example we've been talking about of trying something new and maybe in a perceived higher risk scenario. I think sometimes the feedback we get from people is because they actually can't believe you tried it, not from a wow,
Yeah.
why would she do that? But I almost think they're envious that you actually had the courage to do that in that scenario. I mean, have you had situations where it's turned out what you thought was kind of disbelief you had tried something actually turned out to someone going, "Oh my gosh, that was so amazing."
I mean, I know I've had that like moments like that, like in our Nexus programs that we do, and like when you have all the coaches watching you and you like try a new skill. I remember I had my club coach pull me for a demonstration, and I did like a reverse like chip, and I had never like it was really good, and I was like really surprised at myself. But like I know I've had that with my teammates too, where like I see them try something new, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm so glad that they tried that. Like I've had that where I'm on the flip side of things and I've seen them try something new and how I feel about that.
I think so that reverse, it's like it's a skill you had
Mhm.
hardly ever done. You got pulled out in front of everyone. You, what's going through your head? Like what you said it worked out. Like did you go, how did you deal with that? Was there like little pressure on you? Did you feel a lot of pressure? Did you just say like, oh well, because I'll tell you, I've been in that scenario a lot, and I think 1 out of 100 times it actually works. Usually I'm like, well, do what I say, not what I do.
Right. Yeah. No, it's like, it's tough when you have like all eyes on you. And especially sometimes for me as someone that doesn't love all the attention like that, just like being put on the spot. But I think I just didn't have any time to like get in my head. Like she was just like, this is what we're doing and this isn't just do a demo and like just not giving yourself like that chance to doubt yourself and just like going for it.
Well, I love that. So it's you said not time to get into your own head. So our Tracy, our little voice in our head, did not have time to start yapping at you. Oh my God, there's 100 eyeballs looking at you. Oh my God, you have to do this in the next 4 seconds. Um,
Yeah.
all of that stuff. I think that's good. And when we think about how many times we fail because we overthink something,
Yeah.
I mean, how do you think? How do you think overthinking plays into our fear of what's about to happen?
Mm. I think overthinking plays into like you're thinking of every single negative outcome and you're like I know for me that's also like played into like pieces of anxiety, like trying to make up a bunch of different fake scenarios that have never happened, may not ever happen, but just to like get wrapped up in those is like it's tough. But yeah,
The thing you made me think about on that is that we spend a lot of, probably most of our time thinking of all those negative scenarios you just talked about. This
yeah,
might happen and this might happen. And then we like, oh, if this happens, I don't know, I'll get benched. Whatever. I'll lose my scholarship. We make up all these crazy scenarios. But I've always kind of wondered, wouldn't it be more fair to ourselves to give equal time to the, hey, what if this did work out?
yeah.
And do you see like having that shift, that reframe in those moments? Do you see a good interplay between like faith, relying on some of your faith that, hey, you know what? I can just go for this and yeah, at least I tried. I mean, how do you start bringing that faith in that? it'll be what it is.
Yeah, I think a big thing is like just reminding, like going back to your history and like reminding yourself of like your capabilities and like that you have done the practice and like the training to be able to take this risk and try something new. Or like even for me, like visualization, like visualizing success, like before it even happens, like that is motivating and like empowering to try something new because you're like, I've seen and I've played out how this like is going to be successful, and like that possibility of actually trying that is like really exciting.
So I think you keep making me think of things, and I love the visualization. I love that we visualize what it looks like when I'm successful. But
Mm-hmm.
I think what can build our faith in ourselves um, is when we kind of practice so we can't get something wrong. And
Yeah.
and in order to do that, we have to try to come up with every possible scenario that I would be executing that skill or whatever in, which I don't think is possible because you can never predict what's actually going to happen.
No.
Have you ever tried to visualize scenarios where you're going to struggle? Like I know
Mm-hmm.
I've seen myself be successful, but I know in this scenario this may happen, which will challenge me. Have you ever like visualized that kind of, I don't want to call it negative side of things, but kind of the challenging aspects of performance?
Yeah, I mean, I know I definitely have with performance, but also just like as I step into more leadership this year, like with I'm gonna do like leadership in FCA, and also like for chaplain for our team, and just like remembering like sometimes I do have a little bit of a hard time with public speaking, but also remembering that I have good ideas and things to share and people want to hear from me. Um, and like understanding that might challenge me a little bit, but that on the flip side of that, I'm going to grow so much.
I totally get your public speaking fear. Every time I have to stand up in front of a larger group, especially
Yeah.
if I don't know a lot of people,
Hmm.
it's like, oh my gosh, it's like imposter syndrome kicks in, right? So I don't know. I wonder if imposter syndrome is a fear of judgment or, yeah, I think it's a fear of judgment. Um,
Yeah.
but and you kind of said it that you have good stuff to share, and I think if we can remind ourselves of that, and I've always said, hey, if I can actually reach and impact one person in this audience, I've succeeded,
Hmm.
which makes your job a lot easier when you're staring out in a room of like 300 or something, and you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Crazy. I know one of my professors like really surprised me this year because I had him and he didn't give exams. He only made us do presentations. And at the end of the semester, he was like, "You have amazing like public speaking skills." And I was like, "That's really funny because I don't like doing it." But more you practice, more you get better at it.
Well, there's that preparation that we can build faith in ourselves, and I think that touches in we talked about a little bit. We're always thinking the negative, so we're up there and we're always
Yeah.
thinking like, oh my gosh, people don't think I know what I'm talking about. No one's listening. The best is when people get up and leave, and you see them, and you're like, oh, they left because they think this is dumb. And then,
It's not a good feeling.
right, yeah, then you're up there going, just carry on, one person.
Uh-huh.
So back to another of the litany here. One of the lines was, and I'd like you to like respond to what you think of this in terms of like how your faith-based orientation is, right? And the line says, I will face my fear and I will permit it to pass over me and through me.
Mm. That's actually really good. When you gave me the topic and I was thinking about it, I think for me a lot of like my faith like has helped me like prepare like mentally like before games and things like that. And I remember there was one year for regionals at my club and it was really tough and I wasn't expecting to play and we had a change of coaches and stuff. And like afterwards, like I got a few minutes of playing time and stuff, but I told my mom, I was like, like preparing and like having a good like mindset, like I also like was maybe just expecting to like not feel disappointed and not feel discouraged. But I was like, I still felt those things, but not like to as big of an extent. Like I didn't let it really like consume me and then like have a pity party and just like kind of go into that negative like thinking. Like I think it just didn't have as much of an impact on me, but I was still able to like recognize, hey, that was discouraging, but like it's okay.
Yeah, I think fear is like it probably is an emotion, but I view it as kind of like how we deal with emotions while we're going through things, anger, jealousy, whatever it is.
Yeah.
We can't not feel our emotions. We
Mm-hmm.
just have to kind of manage how to learn how to manage through those. I feel
Yeah.
like fear is the same way. It's like if we have this near knee-jerk reaction to whatever it is, emotion, fear, we respond as in fear, it's fight or flight, right? It's kind of, and I think if we if we allow that to come into us, it kind of creates a breath for us, which makes us think, oh. It, it- that's not that. It's public speaking. It's not a bear
Right.
kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. So I think that's important. And I read a quote somewhere once that said, "Fear is excitement without the breath."
Mm. Yeah.
And I mean, can you think of times kind of on that topic where you felt very like nervous, anxious, um, before an event, and it's not because you were afraid, but it's because you really cared.
Yes. Yeah. I've had a lot of that in field hockey and outside of that and like in the classroom. And like I'd get really excited about like the things I have to share. And like especially when it's stuff that I'm like super passionate about. And it's like I just want to make sure I convey it all like the right way or get it all across. Um, but yeah, and I think another thing with like fear is like or even like with courage, like that doesn't mean that you're not afraid, but that you have the boldness to like step out of your comfort zone and do it anyway.
Yeah, I love that. And I talk a lot about how the interplay between courage and confidence.
Yeah.
And for me, I think we need to rely on our courage when our confidence isn't there.
Mm,
Which is a lot of time because if we think about how often we're actually confident, it's probably not really that often. So we're always kind of taking that risk,
mm-hmm.
which, we get back to the fear of judgment, the fear of failure,
Yeah.
and the fear of success. I'm going to do success at the last. So fear of failure. I mean, we've all gone through that fear of failure. How can
Mm-hmm.
you how can you rely on either your individual faith or your faith in your faith, um,
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to like I'm going to try this and I know there's a good chance I'm going to fail?
Mm. I know for me, like, especially when I'm like trying new things, and I know they probably won't go 100%. Like with my faith, knowing at the end of the day that like my value as a person doesn't change because I made a mistake. And like my giftings and like what I bring to the table is not any less important because I made a mistake. I think sometimes a lot of that like identity gets tied into like the things we do and the mistakes that we make. But I think really separating those has helped me a lot in like my academic and field hockey and everything else.
I really like that too because our identities or the labels we give ourselves,
Mhm.
I think I've been saying recently they suffocate us.
Yeah.
It's back to that kind of fears the mind killer thing. I think um, how have you managed like, let's say those various labels, Annie plays field hockey. Annie's a student. Annie loves to read. Annie loves music. Whatever these things are you enjoy doing. If you have a really off day in one of your identities,
Mm-hmm.
how have you been able to lean on those other identities to kind of keep that overall sense of self at a good level of so you're not self-defeating, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that's a tough one. Um, I think, yeah, for me at the end of the day, just like remembering, like, I those are all things that I love doing and maybe things that I'm like good at, and it's a part of me, but that's not like all that I am, and that's not all that there is to me, and there's so much more to me and so much more that I have to give and offer in different areas. Um yeah, so like even if something was hard one day, be like, you know what, I still got all this other stuff going for me too.
I think that I think that may be one of the more recurring messages in your
Hmm.
new role as chaplain. Like when people are kind of like maybe coming to you and struggling with stuff, I think you may find yourself tapping into that topic a little more than others. How could you see yourself taking your experience with that and like the way you just articulated that back to me? How can you see yourself kind of mentoring others through that thought process?
I know. I think you were away when I gave that one Tuesday talk on identity. But I know I sent it to you. But that's something that I've always been super passionate about because I have had injuries and I had my heart procedure that took me out of sports for a while. And you kind of have to wrestle with like, okay, if I don't have sports, like who am I? And like what do I still have to offer? And like what am I still good at? And what do I still enjoy? Um, and I think a lot of that also just like plays into mental health too. And I see myself mentoring a lot of the girls like just mentally and just like reminding them of like their value and their worth and that it's not dependent on what they how good they were that day or not. um I'm really excited to step into that. So
I'm excited to see you step into it. How do you think? Because you talked about like you wouldn't know you weren't sure what you would be if you weren't an athlete anymore. And I think you hear that a lot, especially with injury, career-ending injuries, obviously, and just graduating, right? Eventually you graduate or retire out of whatever you're doing. How do you view How do you view like how you think about that yourself as a student athlete now that you're in that collegiate role, as opposed to how the journey was to get there? And by that I kind of mean I feel like there's a lot of pressure on youth athletes to get themselves to the recruiting point. Athletics.
mhm.
How do you feel about kind of those fears of being an athlete, not being an athlete now that you are up and being one?
Yeah, I mean, definitely my like recruiting process. It I started it sophomore year and then finished it like spring of senior year. It took me a little bit, and it was hard not having the sport super accessible on the West Coast. Um, but I think like in that time frame, there was a lot of back and forth between like, okay, like I'm still gonna shoot for the stars and go for my goals, but also if this doesn't work out, like that's also okay. And I'll be I'll go to school somewhere else and I can do field hockey club or just do it for fun. Um, and then I was gonna say something else, and then um, we talked about it a lot like during season two, but just like now that I'm at that point, I forget like sometimes that I'm like living out like what I prayed for or like my dreams that I've had for a really long time. And now I'm like living that out. And so that's been a great reminder for me, like when things get challenging and when things get hard, that it's such a privilege to be challenged in like my own choices of like what I want to pursue and like my build myself as a person.
I mean, I think that's interesting. And I think that kind of starts to play into that fear of success thing. And
Mhm.
we may not think of it that way, but it's like you work to get recruited, and it sounds like you had a good, healthy, well, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't. Although I'm sure there was a little bit of fear in there saying, geez, I really want this. Um,
Yeah, sure
right. And
was.
it's like, what if this school doesn't want me? Or what if no school wants me? Or, oh my gosh, she already got recruited. How come I'm not?
Oh yeah. Mhm.
Kind of thing, right? Like how, even though you said you'd be okay with that, how do you rely on that again, back to the faith of geez, I really, really, really want this. Um, but all right, maybe it won't work out.
Yeah, it it's definitely easier said than done, but yeah, I think for me, like playing out like all those, like I did play out different possibilities of like if it doesn't work out. And it was definitely hard. Like when I was like, this is really, I really want to do this. Like I'm super passionate about this. And it's like hard to let that go if it doesn't work out. Um, but yeah, I just kind of let God take the reins on that one. I said, I trust that what you have is good for me and I will like it. And if you want me to play field hockey in college, then that'll be great. And if not, that's okay too.
Like, and I'll like it. So back to that, I started off and got kind of sidetracked on the fear of success. The kind of the final fear. It's like, have you been in situations, and maybe it was through the recruiting process, or maybe, a bunch of different scenarios. Did you ever stop and pause and be like, oh my gosh, what if I actually do get this? Or once you did get it, you're like, oh boy.
Yeah, I was yeah, super excited when I did finally find a school, but then I was like, "Oh yeah, there's a lot that comes with this actually." And so that's been really interesting to play with like both sides of that and like even for me like be confident in my abilities without like fear of becoming like overconfident. And that's been like a big thing for me. Just because I never want to like be overconfident, but you can still have humility and be confident too. And so, yeah, that was something interesting. Definitely being in like Division 2 athletics now and being like, yeah, there's actually a lot of responsibility that comes like with this being in it.
I think the humility, the humble part really helps with that fear of success a little bit
Mm-hmm.
because it's like every time you level up, whether it's from middle school to high school or high school to college or college to pro, you can
Yeah.
be at the top of your game on every single one of those. And I've seen frequently where people level up and they think they're still going to be on top of the game. And one of the hardest things for them to deal with is that all of a sudden, they were the superstar, and now all of a sudden they're on a team of the superstars. And how do you work through that? Yeah, all of a sudden you're getting smacked around. But I think being humble and being like, hey, I know there's work to be done still, I think that really helped. Have you found that to be the case?
Um, yeah, I mean, I know I've talked to like a lot of my friends who went to other programs and they're like, yeah, like they were amazing star player at clubs and they got to college and they're like, yeah, my whole team is really stacked, so I'm not going to get to play for a while. But it's like also knowing like you have so much to learn from the people above you too. Um, but yeah, I mean, getting here, I mean, always I've tried to always remember that I have things to learn and there's always something that I can improve on and there's always going to be people better than me and that I can learn from.
I think that getting into that new environment, and I mean, you probably went through it as a freshman,
Yeah.
stepping on the field, you're like, okay, I'm good to go. I've done all my summer work, and you look around, and you're like, oh, we got fear of judgment all of a sudden. I'm not sure I'm going to try that because she's so good. Well, I think she is, right? Or maybe
Hmm.
it's the fear of failure, like. I'm going to put myself out there and they're all going to be, I guess that's judgment again. Like,
Yeah.
so I think it's funny. They always say comparison's the thief of joy. And I think that plays into fear a little bit because even if
Mhm.
I'm on the same path you are, I might be, I'm 3 years behind you on that path. So how can I hold myself to the standard where you're currently at?
Mhm. Yeah, it's really tough to not compare,
And I
but
think it just made me think saying that too is like, I think one of the things we're afraid to do in those scenarios, like, you're the senior, I'm the freshman, is me just coming up to you and saying, Annie, you're so good at that. How do you do it? I think, maybe that plays in that humility, but we're
Yeah.
afraid to have that conversation because is it because we think we have to know it all and is that back to that fear of judgment?
Mm, yeah, I think, yeah, I think it takes a lot of humility to be able to do that and to be able to be like, hey, I'm actually not as good as this, but I know that you are, and not like from a comparison standpoint, like just from a point of like eager to learn and like that someone else's success like can help create your success story too.
Well, I like that eager to learn. Obviously there's a lot of things that kind of that who do I want to talk to and stuff. But as you're kind of going into more of a leadership role, I mean, what if would you be able to flip that eager to learn into eager to teach? And
Mm.
how would you take something like that? Like you're really good at a skill or at something and you see someone else struggling. I mean, how could you see yourself maybe reaching out to that person instead of waiting them to overcome their fear?
Yeah, I think as like when you're from that teaching perspective, like not like being aware of the people around you and like maybe what they're like having a hard time with and what they're doing like really good at. Um I think I know for me like I tend to get so wrapped up in myself and then I like kind of not paying attention to like everyone else. But from like that teaching perspective, you kind of have to be in tune with like what everyone else is like struggling with and like looking for those pockets and areas that you can offer your like gifts and offer what your like advice and the things that you're good at. And just coming at it from not like, oh, you're messing up really bad and you have this to work on, but like also having that humility, like, hey, this is something that's really worked for me. I'd love to share this with you, or I'd love to help you have success in this area.
I love that you talked about you're too focused on yourself sometimes to see outside of that. And
Hmm.
either in the same sentence or the one immediately after, you talked about how getting to know kind of what triggers other people have or what symptoms they display. When it comes to like fear and kind of faith and fear, how do you
Hmm.
think it helps when you're more outward into that community, right? And you can rely on all of your teammates. Is it beneficial to be that vulnerable with each other to be able to go through those hard moments, or is that too much?
I think it's good. I think it builds a sense of like just a reminder that you're not alone. And like, I've also, like, it's really comforting to meet people who have gone through similar things and like, how did you get through that? Or that's like, that's really hard. How did you deal with that? Um, I think vulnerability builds trust too. Um, and like, even just whether it's like friendships or relationships or on the team, like being able to have like those harder conversations, like, I think you're better for it, like, more than likely.
I like you mentioned the trust, and I think probably some empathy's in there too.
Mhm.
I mean, I've seen it at times where I can recognize, like, if you're coming off the field, and I can either tell from your body language or something else, and, saying something like, "Hey, Annie, you're probably feeling like this right now." And you being like, "Whoa, yes, how do you know that?" And I think like knowing that about each other, kind of like you said, we're not the only ones going through it because I think one of the things we fear is that it's only us, it's only me.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. And then that way it's like easy to get encouragement from. And then even after those conversations, it's easier to ask for help because you know those people like have your back and they're like safe to talk to and seek advice from. And so then it's easier to be like, hey, I'm having a hard time with this. Like, can you like knowing you can have those conversations helps a lot too.
Yeah, totally. I think I want to end on the fear of success point. I think we kind of brushed over it. Have you
Mhm.
been in a situation where you're worried if you get something, what other people are, what's someone going to think because I was successful? Or did I take this away from somebody else because I was successful? Because I think a lot of times we don't want to succeed because I feel bad for the people who didn't get it.
Mm, yeah, I have had that sometimes. I'm trying to think of like a specific example, but I know even just because me and my sister spend so much time together that sometimes we like will get like that sometimes where it's just like, oh man, like she's really good at that. Um, and it's just like comparison even then still. But no, I definitely have had that happen before, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Well, and I think it's kind of the job interview kind of thing. It's like one person can get the job and everyone else doesn't. But
Yeah.
I think for the majority of things that happen to us, it's not a zero-sum game. It's like I can win and you can win. And I think if we think of it, what do they say? A rising tide brings all boats up or something like that. I think if we can think of most scenarios in terms of it's not me or you, it's us. I think that can help sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah.
Okay, so moving on. This one was interesting. Actually, I was reading a Stephen King novel the other day. And this quote was in it. I don't remember the context, but it said, "If a fear cannot be articulated, it cannot be conquered." And I think that goes back to what we were talking about, kind of in like letting that fear come into you and giving that breath and thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, can you think of times where you were able to like, maybe you didn't really know why it was fearful, but when you were able to actually think about it and identify it, it was a lot easier to deal with?
Yeah, I've had plenty of that in my faith journey and like just on the field. Like if I'm feeling like really frustrated and I'm like, or I forget what they say, but like if either anger is like the underlying emotion of fear or one of those two, like if you kind of get to the root of like what you're feeling, and then you're like, oh man, like that's what I was struggling with, like even like comparison. And you're like, I'm just really frustrated all the time and I'm not satisfied with how I'm doing. It's like, well, what are you really having a hard time with? You're having a hard time with envy and comparison. And like then when you're able to like identify that, then I know for me, then you can look and be like, hey, let's focus on like what I have to offer and like let's practice like what I'm good at and get better and stronger in that and what areas I need to grow in.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it either masks the real what's
Mm-hmm.
going on, or well, either way, it pulls us off of our own journey, which in
Yeah.
the long run either takes us longer to get where we want or totally derails us.
Yeah.
So here's a good one for you, and I think some of our fears. Obviously, we're products of our environment, culturally, family-wise, school, whatever it is, right? But
Yeah.
what are your thoughts around if we're like unwilling to question like our beliefs, our belief system, the environments we're in, how often does that unwillingness to question create fears? Fear of a different group, fear of a different whatever it is, because we're like, oh, this is the way things should be. It's almost like, we're afraid of different perspectives on things.
Yeah. I think it's healthy to challenge like different like ways of thinking and like even like coming into like a new team and like how things were on some of my old teams and getting here and being like, oh, this isn't like how maybe I'm like used to doing things, or like even asking like, what is like, I mean, it's scary to ask like coaching staff, but just like, hey, like I'm having a hard time like understanding like what you want us to get out of this, or like what your purpose is behind this drill or whatever. Um, but I think that's like healthy to talk about for sure.
I think you made me think of something. You're good at making me think of things. You talked about a new environment, and
Mm-hmm.
probably our environment we've created with the field hockey team is a little different than environments people have come out of, for whatever reason. How much? So you sit there, you get into a new environment, you're taking it all in, and you're like,
Mhm.
no, this can't be real. I can't, can I really do that? How much fear is there in, kind of sticking your neck out and being like, oh, I guess I'll be the first one to see if that's true, because you're almost in disbelief that that different environment is, I don't want to say real, but you're actually not going to get beat up.
Yes. No, I had a lot of that this year with like my previous coaches and like especially with like injuries or like not feeling great because I was like a lot of my previous coaches I felt like I was just making excuses, but like coming into here and I was talking and I was like, "Hey, like I'm not 100% today." And coach being like, "That's okay. Like we'll like pick up for that. Like we'll make up that 30% like on your behalf." And that was like new to me. I was like, "Oh, it's okay to not like be 100%, but just to give 100% of what I have that day." So,
Yeah, I love that. And I think of that, and maybe we've talked about it, is like that team battery's always got to be at 100.
yeah.
And you talk about making it up. So if like you're only operating at 90 today, I've got to go 110, but it's all good because the team's at 100.
Yes.
I think I did that
Mhm.
math right. So um, let's talk. One of my favorite topics is Tracy, the voice inside our heads.
Mhm.
Um, she constantly likes to remind us how poor we are at things. I can't think of a time when she's told me I was really good at something. Um, so how does that relationship between the voice in your head and your fears, how does that happen, and how are you able to rely on your preparation, your faith, or whatever to kind of, keep her where she belongs and not directing your outcomes?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I know we did talk about it this year, but there was one time I think you told me, like, literally just to tell Tracy, like, enjoy the show, like, have fun. Like, I'm gonna do my thing and I'm gonna do it well because I'm prepared. And, like, sometimes it's not always motivating, especially for me when Tracy starts going and it's, like, a little discouraging and you have to, like, really shut it down and be like, hey, like, that's actually not true. Um, and it's like hard to like even recognize that, but it kind of goes back, I think, to what we were talking about, like identifying, like when you realize and you're like, hey, that's actually not true. And that's just like me coping and me being upset by my mistake, maybe. I think you're able to get over it a lot faster.
Yeah, I think that's one of those it happens and we make it personal, like, or she does,
Mhm.
right? You're horrible at that. Um we kind of make it into this huge thing like, oh, you'll never be good at that or never be able to do that kind of thing.
Mhm.
It's so how have you said recognize it, kind of tell her to go sit back and watch this. Um,
Mhm.
but how have you been able to move past that? That I'm not sure I can do this, but I know I still have to. I mean, what kind of drives you to push through?
Mm. I would definitely say my faith again. um, but just like, yeah, remembering what's true, like for me, and like, oh, that I'm important and I'm valued regardless. And like, if I make a mistake or if people judge me, like that's okay. And like that's out of my control. Um, but yeah, just pushing past and like having a bigger, like thinking of the bigger picture too. Like, it's okay if this takes me a little bit more time than someone else. Like, it's okay if they got it quicker than I did. Doesn't mean that your way of like doing things is like less than. Maybe it's just different.
Yeah, when you talked a couple times about it's not true or prove it's true or whatever that. um, when you adopt that, when you recognize that and take on that attitude, kind of
Mhm.
kind of what are you thinking to disprove that negative thought Tracy's given you? Is it kind of just a, hey, I'm going to let go a little more and just do it? Or are you really kind of focused in on a specific thing with a lot more intent? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it depends. Like when like, I'm trying to think of an example. Like, for if one of my negative thoughts is like, if I'm not good at field hockey, then I won't have friends. or like things like that, like fear and like kind of like lies like that. Um, and then just like kind of combating that with like, actually, like my value as a person doesn't come from how good I am at field hockey. Um, and just like things like that, I guess, are like what I've done to really help combat that when I'm getting like stuck.
You made me think, there it goes again. Um, you made me think about like trying to prove something wrong or disprove something. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think a common fear is like fear of the dark. If
Hmm.
we think about right, with all the lights are out, we can't see anything. You made me think of that like being the fear of the dark. When you're in that scenario, I mean, what's your flashlight,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
right? What do you, so like when you're in those deep moments, I mean, first, why are people afraid of the dark? I mean, and how do you get yourself out of that? And I think we talked about it a little bit on and off, but I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think also, yeah, circling back to like what we said, like identifying, like that's like a flashlight, like for sure. Like if you're having a hard time with something and you can't like quite pinpoint it, and like talking to someone else and having them be like, oh, maybe you're having a hard time with this. And being like, yeah, that's exactly it. And then kind of figuring out like a strategy to like combat that and like overcome it. Um, that can definitely be like a form of flashlight or just like help in general, like just talking to other people.
I think, and the thing I like about that is, it doesn't matter how dark the room is. It only takes
Mm,
a sliver of light to change that.
right.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think how how important is, because I think when we think of things to get us out of things, we're thinking that it has to be huge, right? I think of like opportunities. When we think of opportunities, we think it has to be an open door, right? Hey, one door closes and another door opens. But I think opportunities sometimes appear as cracks, not open doors. And I think it's the
Mm-hmm.
same way here. What are your thoughts on finding that small thing?
Mm-hmm. Even I think even we underestimate like the impact of like doing just like the small things or just like those small reminders or those like small just like a few deep breaths like when you're like kind of getting caught up. Um, but even like the small victories like that like is still a win. Um, and like looking for those like cracks to push through the opportunity, like push open and see what more there is.
Yeah, and I think kind of on that, fear can paralyze us.
Yeah.
It can get us into a victim mentality. Oh, poor me. Why is this happening for me? And I think
Yeah.
to your point of a small thing, I think taking an action, no matter what the scenario is, and it's same when we're afraid, and maybe this is courage, right? Can we still do something in the face of that to move us forward or get us out of that? I love that concept.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It doesn't always have to be something big. It's easier to just start small.
1%.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I've got one more because I want to respect your time.
Good.
So let's see. This quote. I love this quote. Georgia O'Keeffe. I think she was an actress like a long time ago. She said, I've been afraid every single day of my life, and I've gone ahead and done it anyway. What are your thoughts on that idea?
I love that because I mean, you can still be afraid. You can still be a little like fearful, like I don't know what's like gonna happen, but having just like the courage to do it anyway and to just not, well, it's hard to like not be afraid. It's easier said than done, but just to go for it. Like not give yourself that time to doubt, not give yourself the time to overthink and just do it. Like even with sports, like you're not going to feel super like enthusiastic, but like discipline, like you have to do it on days you're tired and days you don't want to. You still have to do like hard things. Um so it's just like that builds resilience.
Yeah, I think this was a really good way to end this because I think we kind of talked about just doing it, taking that action, even though fear already exists. So whether we're talking fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of success, fear of the dark, fear of whatever, the beautiful
Mhm.
thing about the present moment is nobody's been here before.
Yep.
So it's like you can't tell me what's going to happen. I
Mm-mm.
can't tell myself what's going to happen. So if we think about living in fear, if we never know any given moment what's going to happen, we can be paralyzed or we can use faith.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Love
Love
it.
it.
Annie, I appreciate your time today. This was awesome. Everything I had hoped for.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And I should be seeing you soon.
Yes, few weeks.
Yeah. See you, Annie.
Thank you.
Bye.